Okay, so ready for this. We're going to like really get into law enforcement ethics.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And we've got this, it's really interesting, actually. It's called the Recruit Code of Honor.
Okay.
And it's from Jefferson College.
Interesting.
Law Enforcement Academy. And it's basically like
Hold on.
it lays out all the stuff that they like really want their new recruits to know
I see.
about how to be a, an ethical law enforcement officer.
Gotcha.
So we're going to kind of break it down, right? Look at what these values mean, like when you're actually out there.
Yeah, out in the field. Like, how do you actually implement this stuff?
Exactly.
It's one thing to,
To have it on paper.
right, have it in a month.
But another thing to actually live it.
Totally. Okay, so there's 8 key principles.
Yeah.
And I thought, let's just jump right in. So the first one is integrity and honesty.
And one of the things it talks about is being transparent and accountable. But like, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, it's a broad concept. So I guess some real world examples, we could start with transparency, right? So that would mean things like body cameras, making sure that there's clear communication anytime an officer is interacting with a member of the public.
Oh, okay.
Making information available whenever possible. So like, if there's a policy or something, having that be transparent and accessible.
Oh, okay.
And then the accountability side. This is where we see internal reviews, civilian oversight boards, and then, of course, there has to be, like, actual consequences if misconduct does occur.
Right. Otherwise, it's just words.
Exactly. And it all boils down to trust. That's the foundation, right? Because without that trust between law enforcement and the community...
You can't really have anything else, can you?
Exactly. It's almost impossible to have effective policing without that basis of trust.
Totally. Okay, so you have that trust, and then the next principle is professionalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this one's interesting because it really emphasizes, like, the idea that whatever one officer does reflects on everybody.
Yeah.
Like the whole department, or even like
on the whole profession.
The whole profession, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's this idea that law enforcement officers they're kind of like walking symbols, right? They represent something.
They represent something bigger than themselves.
Exactly. And the tough part about that is we've all heard the saying, one bad apple can spoil the bunch.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And unfortunately, that's really true in this case because, if you have just 1 or 2 officers engaging in misconduct, that can really impact public perception of the entire force.
Totally. Okay, so then we move on to respect.
Right.
And this one is super interesting to me because it basically says, like, you got to treat everybody with respect.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
No matter
background, beliefs.
Right.
Socioeconomic status.
It doesn't matter, yeah. So why is that? Like, why is that so important?
Yeah. It's because of this concept called procedural justice. And it's the idea that people need to feel like they're being treated fairly by the system, regardless of the outcome.
Okay.
So even if somebody, they get a speeding ticket, right? They're probably not happy about that.
Right.
But if the officer was respectful, treated them with dignity, they're much more likely to feel like, okay, well, the process was fair.
It makes sense.
Even though I don't like the outcome.
It makes sense.
And beyond just, that kind of thing, showing respect can actually help de-escalate a situation.
Oh, how so?
Yeah. If you come into a situation and it's already tense and you're immediately, disrespectful or,
aggressive.
It's just going to escalate things. Right. But if you can come in and be calm and respectful, it can sometimes kind of break the temperature down.
Make it more human. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So next we have service to community, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this one's all about like being proactive.
Yeah. It's not just
just like answering the call, right?
Exactly. It's about going above and beyond.
So, like, what are some examples of that?
So think about community policing initiatives. Officers who are out there, they're familiar faces in the neighborhood. They're getting to know the residents, the business owners.
Right.
There are youth outreach programs, working with young people, trying to build those positive relationships, working with local organizations to address the root causes of crime. So, if there's a problem with, poverty or lack of opportunity, working with community groups to address those things.
So they're like really part of the community, not just...
Right. Not just an outside force.
Like coming in.
Exactly. It's about, being part of the solution.
Right. Okay. So then we have courage.
Yeah.
And this one's pretty intense.
Yeah, it really.
He talks about, like, protecting the innocent, confronting wrongdoing,
Yeah.
personal sacrifice. Like, what kind of toll does that take on a person?
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. I mean, first of all, there's the inherent risk of the job, right? They're putting themselves in harm's way.
Right.
But then there's also the psychological burden, right? They're dealing with trauma, with difficult situations.
Just stuff they see.
Yeah, exactly. Things that most people will never, have to even imagine.
Right.
And they have to make really tough decisions sometimes, split-second decisions that could have life or death consequences.
Oh, wow.
So it's really important that officers have good support systems.
Right.
Access to mental health resources.
That they can deal with it.
Exactly. Because, PTSD is unfortunately a very real issue in this profession.
Right. And I guess that kind of leads into accountability, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, not just about being accountable to, like, the law.
Right. It's about...
But accountable to, like, the whole...
To yourself, to your department,
yeah.
the community. And learning from mistakes. Nobody's perfect.
Right.
And things are going to go wrong sometimes.
So how does that actually happen, though? Like, how do they actually learn from their mistakes?
So, there are internal review processes. Anytime there's a serious incident, or even, maybe not so serious, but there's a process where they go back and they look at, okay, what happened?
Right.
What went well? What could we have done better?
Oh, interesting.
There's debriefing, so officers can talk about what happened.
Kind of process it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, ongoing training is huge. The world is constantly changing.
Right.
Laws are changing. Best practices are changing. There's new technology.
So you got to keep up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a constant process of learning and trying to improve.
Okay, so then there's teamwork. And it's interesting because it's not just about, like, officers working with each other.
Right. It's about
like
working with other agencies, with the community.
So why is that so important?
Yeah. I mean, think about it, right? Modern law enforcement it's so complex.
Right.
You've got different jurisdictions, right? You've got city police, county sheriff, state police, federal agencies.
Yeah.
You have all these different specialized units.
Oh, right.
SWAT teams, bomb squads.
Right.
Detectives.
Yeah.
And they all have to work together, especially during large-scale events.
Like an emergency or...
Exactly. If there's a natural disaster or a terrorist attack, you need to have all those different agencies communicating seamlessly.
It's like a giant puzzle.
Yeah, exactly.
With all the pieces.
All the pieces have to fit together.
Having to fit together.
Exactly.
Okay, last one. Ethical conduct. And I guess, like, the big thing here is there's no tolerance for corruption.
Yeah, zero tolerance.
So how do you actually enforce that?
Yeah, well, it starts at the top, right? It starts with leadership.
Oh, okay.
Setting a strong ethical example.
Leading by example.
Exactly.
Right.
And then you have mechanisms like internal affairs divisions.
Right.
Whistleblower protections.
Oh, okay.
So encouraging people to come forward.
If they see something.
Exactly. And really it's about fostering a culture where ethical behavior isn't just expected, it's ingrained.
It's not even a question.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's how things are done.
Okay, so it seems like this recruit code of honor, it's not just a list of rules.
No, it's so much more than that. It's
it's a framework for navigating the complexities of this job.
Right, because it is complex.
Yeah.
And I guess it's a reminder that, police officers, they have a lot of power.
Yeah. And it's got to be used responsibly.
Absolutely.
So I guess, like, the question is, if you were training to be an officer,
yeah,
which of these principles would you find the most challenging, like, to live up to every day?
That's a good question.
And I guess, for everyone listening, like, how does all this impact, like, how we interact with the police? I mean, that's something to think about, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's it for our deep dive today. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.